Welcome to the Discover podcast, where we view faith as a discovery journey with Jesus to help you become the person God created you to be. Hey everybody, welcome back to this episode of the Discover podcast. I am joined today by the one and only Kris Haugen, our executive pastor, who's been here for a handful of years, and yeah, it's fun to have you on. You did not make it into last season. We had a few staff members last season. You did not make it, but you are front and center for season 2. Congratulations.
I'm very just thankful that I was able to be drafted in the second round. Hopefully that can to my advantage.
Right. I'm sure it will be. Well, so this season we are talking specifically about the idea of God on the move and how it is you discern God on the move, how you follow God on the move. What are the things that God has been doing? What are the things God is doing? And one of the things that we as a staff thought would be interesting for our church to hear is your story of your journey, in part making the transition from the corporate world to the church world, but also just kind of how you discerned the call to ministry. And so that's what we're going to be talking about today. People who are newer to the church may not know that you had a former life as something other than a pastor, and you may want to just go ahead and share with everybody what that was.
Yeah, so former life, I love the way that's worded, but I think it's so accurate, actually. For 26 years, I worked for McDonald's for franchisees in various roles. So from the guy who made your French fries to eventually directing operations for different restaurants. So got to see how the fries are made, right? How the sausage is made, as you like to say. Yeah, I really enjoyed my time there. But at the end of the day, I knew that God was calling me and calling our family into something different. Wasn't sure what that was yet, but I've been very thankful that Meadowbrook was where that place was.
Yeah. So let's go back to the beginning of that journey with McDonald's, and then we'll kind of work our way up to how you discern the call from McDonald's to Meadowbrook. Yeah, just kind of walk us through what happened, what transpired, how you entered into that role or that world of McDonald's, kind of where you were at in life and what you were doing.
I mean, it started off, I think, as a lot of people do. So senior year of high school, I was like, I should probably get a job to be able to pay for the things that I need. I just so happened I had a friend whose parents owned a McDonald's franchise. So I made mention to him that, hey, I'm thinking about getting a job. And he's like, hey, I know a place. So his dad called me up, offered me a position. I was like, okay, this is great. So I worked there throughout the summer, went to college, and I was like, I kind of need some spending money, and continued to work with McDonald's in order to pay for school and get some spending money. And over the course of time while I was in school, I started to recognize, like, I'm pretty good at this. I can make a living out of doing this and really enjoy what I'm doing.
What were you doing specifically, though, when you say I'm good at this?
So I was managing at that time.
Okay.
So I really only spent about a year and a half in any like normal hands-on day-to-day worker role. By the time I was entering my sophomore year of college, I was managing shifts. And then by the time that my senior year was done, I was an assistant manager and training to be a general manager of the restaurant. So I was just learning a lot of those hands-on. How do you lead people? Not just in terms of from hour to hour, minute to minute, but in terms of week to week. How do you lead people to get them to where they should be, not only for work, but as individuals? Yeah.
Kind of started as a senior in high school. Maybe there was a break when you entered into college, but if there was, you went right back in?
Yeah, there was a break for the first semester.
Yeah.
Just that kind of tried to get my feet wet in college and figure out what's going on and how to make it work. And then I realized real quick, I didn't have the money to do the things I wanted to do. So it was easy to jump right back in there because I already knew the processes. I knew some of the way things worked. And, you're like, hey, I've done this before. I can jump right in.
Right.
Everybody likes that.
Yeah. And then you never left 26 years later. So not that we can cover all the details of 26 years in 20 minutes or whatever, but just what were some of the things that you feel like were instilled in you, both from like a character standpoint, work ethic standpoint, from your time working at McDonald's? And then we'll start to say, how does that translate to ministry?
Yeah, I think you really key on a couple things, right? Work ethic is important. You start to learn that as you're managing people and you're working alongside people, what they value is somebody who can do it with them, not somebody who's just always directing. You think of those images of people as leaders, right? The leader isn't the guy whipping
Right.
people, pulling him. And so I had to learn some of that over time. Just the other thing that goes with that is valuing people. Everybody has a story, and their story shares a lot about where they came from, but also about who they're designed to be.
Mm-hmm.
And not everybody's necessarily able to see the growth and the positive in their story. And so what I learned in that time at McDonald's is really how to hear somebody's story and how to challenge them to be more. To challenge them to be who they're created to be and what they're created to be.
Yeah, that's great. So I can still remember the day that we posted the job for an executive director, and you were literally the first person who emailed me. Like, you did not go, I'm sure you did submit through whatever portal we did, but then you also emailed me, and I can still remember where I was when the email came through. So take us to your side of that, like kind of what was going on in your life leading up to like, hey, here's this church in Milwaukee, because you came from, some people may know, but others may not know. Where'd you come from?
I came from Oregon.
Yeah. So that's not a small, like, hey, we're just going to like switch jobs. We're also making a cross-country move if we actually take this job. So take us through kind of what was going on in your life and why you felt like, yeah, I should probably leave this 26-year career and go be a pastor. And then how like you like received that or found that posting.
So I'll probably put a little more detail into this because I just think there's a lot that goes in there. The first thing is I went to school originally at a Bible college, and a lot of people that I knew at that time in my life really thought, okay, his life is directed towards the pastorate. He's going here. He's going to become a pastor. He's going into ministry. And what I saw from myself in that time is I was way too broken for that. There was no way that God was going to be able to use me because I didn't see the value of who I was in that time. And over time, God started to put people in situations in my life that began to redeem those elements. I think Mary Beth was huge. My wife, she has always been able to really speak God's truth into me when I start to hear the lies of the world around me. But at the same time, we adopted our oldest 4, and as we started to raise them, we started to recognize what God's put this as a ministry in our hearts. Like, raising these children is a ministry. And as I started to get older at McDonald's, God started to change the frame of my thinking and go, you know what? Leading these people is a ministry. I'm able to talk to them in a way that maybe other people can't. I think teenagers especially, one of the things I started to recognize is when teenagers look at people, they look at their parents and like, these people are my parents, right? They have no idea what I'm dealing with. And they look at teachers and like, these people are paid to be with me. But when they looked at somebody who was in my role, who made it a point to walk with them and encourage them and ask them questions about their life, what they saw is somebody who cared for them who didn't have to. And so God started to show us in that time, like, this is a ministry that I'm calling you to. So we started to see that not only were we working and not only were we raising kids, but we were really living out this ministry that God had called us into. And over the course of those moments, he opened the door for me to take some classes at Corbin University and enter their Doctorate of Ministry program. Really, my thought process was, oh, he's going to lead me into teaching somewhere. And everybody used to ask him, like, why are you taking these classes? Well, I'm going to teach, or, you know, it's making me better as a leader. And as I started to finish the classwork on that, I started to really feel this pressure of like, no, there's something more that God's calling me to. Started to ask some questions and talk to some people and just say, hey, I'm really trying to discern what is God saying to me in these moments. And I remember a friend of mine, Kris, we were out to lunch, and I looked at him and said, Kris, I just don't get it. Like, I feel like God's calling me to go into ministry, but I don't know where I fit. Like, I've spent my entire life in business. None of this makes sense to me. And Kris looked at me and goes, you're an executive pastor, Kris. What are you talking about? And I was just like, what? It was just a matter of fact. It just came right out of his mouth. And I was like, I'd never thought about what that position was or what it entailed. And he and I had that conversation. We get back to class, and literally 5 minutes into class, I get a text message from Mary Beth, and it just says, it's time. And I knew instantly, like the Spirit was speaking me right in that moment. Like I knew what she was saying, but I was like, I need to hear her say it. And I was like, what do you mean it's time? And she goes, if we're going to do this, if we're really going to follow what God wants to do, it's time, and you need to be ready to do it. And we're just going to make it happen. And I was like, okay, we're doing this. And that was about a week and a half before Meadowbrook posted. Kind of long story, kind of what led me there. But even that posting, the reason you got the email is because it wasn't active yet on the church website. So the posting had gone live on the
Church staffing, maybe?
church
Yeah, yeah.
staffing, and I saw it, and I was like, oh man! And I saw it in the morning. I started looking at some sermons, looking at the church's belief statement. I wanted to make sure, like, if I was going to do this, I was going to be a good fit. And then I looked at the church website. I'm like, it's not on there. I'm like, maybe this is old.
Yeah.
Maybe this isn't what I'm supposed to do. So I just emailed you.
Yep.
And I was like, I'll just email the pastor. and I remember because it was like fourth time on the West Coast.
Yep.
And you emailed me back almost right away.
Yep.
And I was like, what's this guy doing at like 6:30 in the evening?
Still working. Still working.
So, and we went back and forth, I think, over a couple of emails. And you're like, yep, should be live momentarily.
Yeah.
Go ahead and send your stuff in. So, yeah, that started I think, 2-month process.
Yeah, because that would have been probably late May, early June. We would have posted.
It was like June 8th or something.
Yeah. That's crazy because we had so it was 21, the summer of 21. We had just moved, or we were on the verge of moving from one house to another. It was a crazy season because we had 3 people. So you talk about like this idea of like God moving, like God's moving in your life. He was moving in our church in a substantial way because we had 3 staff members who all subsequently, is that the right word? Right? Monty's giving me the thumbs up. Yeah. Like one right after another, like every 2 weeks, another one was like, hey, it's time for me to move on. Hey, it's time for me to move on. And it was just like, okay, this is a major summer of transition. And my sense in that time was like, oh, God's bringing us into a new season because a third of our staff is moving on. And so for me, I was very dialed into, I just need to pay attention to all the people who are coming into our inbox of like, hey, interview me, hey, interview, And so, that was just a crazy summer on my end of just, how do I discern all of these people? I mean, I think for your position, we easily had 25 to 30 people apply. And then we had our, director of discipleship job. And then we had our children's ministry job. And so like, that was a fun season, exciting season, a challenging season, and one where it felt like we had to be really dialed into, what is God doing and who is God bringing and who's the right fit for where we are. So say a little bit more on your end, like so you obviously like Mary Beth's like kind of confirmation was an indicator of like, oh, God's up to something. But how else did you kind of discern this is what God is doing rather than just like, this is something I want to do. This is something my wife wants me to do. Like, where's God in the midst of this?
That's funny because you say these statements of like, this is something I want to do. This is something my wife wants to do. And both of us will tell you neither one of us wanted to do it. Neither one of us wanted to do it. And neither one of us felt that we were right to do it. What we saw, I talk about, 21-year-old Kris, who was like, no, I'm not supposed to go into ministry. 44-year-old Kris was the same guy.
Yeah.
The difference was I had people who were consistently asking me those questions about when I was going to make the transition. My pastor at the time, Nathan, I started talking to him about what I was feeling, and he was like, oh, yeah, you could do this. Oh, yeah, yep. I've known you've been called into this. Day one, we were trying to figure out if his church was a church we were going to attend at the time. And I walked in and we're talking, and halfway through the conversation, he goes, so when are you going to become a pastor then? And I was like, I'm not going to become a pastor. What are you talking about? So those type of questions kept coming up, and it was almost disconcerting because Mary Beth and I were like, no, we do not want to do this. She had 3 rules about somebody she was going to marry. She'll tell you this, like from the moment she was a teenager on. She's like, I'm not marrying an astronaut, I'm not marrying a politician, and I'm not marrying a pastor. Like, I was like, oh, sorry.
That's funny.
Like, hopefully I still make the grade now.
Yeah. I don't know if I've heard that list of no's. Astronaut, politician. I get politician. It's very interesting why she said astronaut. Not too many people actually qualify to be an astronaut, but
I know. I think I'm actually probably too tall.
Yeah. So you have all these people who are like, when are you going to do it? When are you going to do it? What do you think they were seeing that caused them to ask that question?
I think they saw in me somebody who God was changing their heart, that God was guiding them to recognize life as a ministry. That the way I approached things weren't necessarily the same way everybody else in business did. I think probably the greatest affirmation I received in all of it, the guy I was working for at McDonald's at the time, Travis, it was really hard to tell him I was leaving. And it was, I actually told him there was a chance I was leaving just before I flew out here for the interview. And I was like, hey, I just need to be honest with you. Here's what's going on. And I broke down at the time because McDonald's was what I knew. It was the people I knew. I was the people I loved. And when everything was confirmed that I was coming here, I just sat down with him again and I told him, and he looked at me and he smiled and he goes, Kris, I always knew you were leaving me. And I always knew you were going to become a pastor. And this is a guy who doesn't have a faith background.
Yeah.
This is a guy who doesn't attend church every day, but looked at me and somehow knew that's the path I was taking before I did. And I think at that moment is when I fully embraced it. And I was like, okay, if God's showing him this, and if God's showing all these other people this, then why am I not willing to allow God to show me what he wants to do?
So that was, it sounds like you were in a season of a I don't know, 8 months, a year plus, where people are like asking you this, or how long was that?
It was, I mean, I would say it's probably 3 years, but it was intense for probably the last year. It started with simple little questions, and then it was more directive. And so much so that it was like, it didn't surprise anybody. Even like I was coaching baseball at the time and travel baseball, and every one of the parents was like, oh yeah, we're just waiting for this. I'm like, how does God show everybody else? And I think that's so often the way it works is we close our mind off sometimes to what God wants us to do because we have this idea of what we can't do instead of being open to what God says he can do. Very big differences, but that's what changes lives. It's never what we can or can't do that changes lives. We don't have that ability. What God can do through us will change more lives than we could ever imagine.
You apply for the job. It sounds like it was Mary Beth's text that was like, okay, this is like the final call or the final straw that broke the camel's back, but that didn't seem like the right analogy necessarily. But it was kind of like the last moment, like, okay, I guess this is it. We are gonna do the last final confirmation. Yeah. So you get that email, I respond, and then I mean, we went back and forth because you didn't come out for an actual visit until the end of August, right? So it was probably I mean, in part it's because we were hiring for like 2 other positions and we were going through all these rounds of just interviews for your position and 2 other positions. So it wasn't until the end of August. And I'll never forget, like that weekend, I don't know if I was in the car with you or I had dropped you and I was going somewhere and I was like, shoot, like I have a wedding that I have to do tomorrow. There was so much going on that weekend that I forgot that I had to officiate this wedding. And fortunately, I remembered the day before, and it wasn't one of those weddings where we had a rehearsal. So it's just like, it was just kind of funny and wild. But kind of walk through that weekend and how you perceived the idea of discerning, is God leading us here versus elsewhere?
Yeah, that's great. First of all, we're just going to apologize now. If you're just now realizing that Brian forgot he was doing your wedding until the day before.
Right.
He still remembered. I'm sure it was great.
I looked good.
Yeah.
We did it. It happened. You're now married.
No, I think by the time that we had gotten here, we were trying to figure out, like, is this where we're supposed to be, or this is where we're hoping God's bringing us? Because I think once you get to that point in the interview process, like butterflies are there and everything else. And so it really takes that time to take a step back and try to sense God's presence and his peace in the moment. And I would say for all of us, it happened instantly. So we came out and it was Kellen and Cammie, so our 2 youngest, and Mary Beth and I. And as we flew in to Milwaukee, if you've ever flown into Portland over the Columbia, there's this very similar feeling in the flight path. And we flew in and we looked down, and instantly we talked about it later on. All of us just had this relief that came over us. And it was like, this is home. Like, we're about to land at home. And as we were driving through town, everything just felt similar. I think it might have been your house I walked into for the first time. And I looked at Mary Beth and I laughed. And I was like, I know this floor design. Like, I can tell you where every room in this house is, because it's very similar to floor designs in Portland. So there are all these things that we were worried about. How do we acclimate to a new culture, to new people, to a new area? And then God kind of showed us in right away that, hey, it's not that different. Like, you can do this. And then as we started to talk to people, there was just this welcoming nature that we were like, we actually had to discern, like, are these people really like this?
Yeah.
Or are they just trying to get us to come here? And thankfully, really like that.
We're really nice. We are really nice.
Yeah. But I think, so there were just a lot of things throughout that weekend, between just that peace that came over us, the conversations that we had. I think even conversations that you and I had leading into it, this idea of like, if we came, like, there were things that were going to be in place that would cause a problem. Like, Kellen was in the middle of football season as a freshman, and you looked at me and you're like, don't come until the season's over. And I was like, really? Like, yeah. And I'm like, wait, hold on. So like, all these things that I had created boundaries for, that I was like, okay, it can't happen because of this.
Right.
Okay, it can't happen because of this. God was like, that's not a thing. That's not a thing. Like, God understood that my first instinct was to run. And he was like, I'm not going to let you do it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And as I think of like the season we were entering into, right? So we had earlier in 2021, we had put together the first draft of like what now is our renovation project that we completed, a year or so ago. And it kind of got put on pause because we had this major transition, but knowing that whoever we hired was going to be the person who is really going to have to like walk and lead the way through that, to say like, that's why we're hiring an executive pastor, is to have somebody do the operational side of things, the building side of things, the technology side of things. And we were talking throughout the building project, and I would check in with you, because you had a lot on your plate at that point, between working through the ordination process, finishing your doctorate, and then having this building renovation project. And you had to finish your doctorate in that year, because why?
Because they were stopping the program that I was in. That they were going to relaunch it as something different, and they were like, it has to be done by this time. And I thought I had a whole nother year,
and they were like,
didn't work
nope.
that way.
Yeah. And so you're working on all those things, and I'm asking you, how are you feeling? Do you need me to step in with the building project? And your response was,
no, I got it.
Yeah. Like, because why though? Like, it wasn't just like, I got it, but.
No, I think I knew what I was doing.
Right.
Right. It wasn't, I had done it so many times before, working for McDonald's, having been part of building projects, complete restaurant teardowns and rebuilds, or renovations throughout them all, that there were things about it that felt natural. But also, I think for me, that ability to just do something, to use my hands from time to time, which I had to do throughout the project, really starts to center me. And so it actually helped me having to be able to step back into that, instead of having to be bogged down with all the mental stuff from ordination and my doctorate.
Yeah. So I just think from the standpoint of like God on the move, God doing things, God working things, like bringing somebody who I, for whatever reason, was like, I don't have to worry about this at all. Like, there was just this sense of trust that he's got this. And not that I was completely hands off, but you really led the way in that. And I do feel like that was like God bringing the right person for the right moment for that specific task. And not that I was using that as a filter for who to choose, but it just was like, oh, wow, this person can really execute this really, really well. And it's hard to believe that now you're almost 4 years in, right? Like this November, next month will be 4 years, right? I'll hit that 4 month mark. So let's talk about that transition of like, okay, you make the move, you're here, you've discerned that this is where you're supposed to be. And then you have to make the transition. And what was, like, just how did you feel like God was at work? Because sometimes those transitions aren't always easy when you, one, make a cross-country move with teenage kids, two, you move from a corporate world to a ministry world, and you're changing jobs in a major way, and you have like this doctorate program you're doing. Like, how did you sense God teaching you different things in that season?
I think I walked in going, well, God, I've done this and I agreed to do what you want me to do. So you're going to make my life easy. That wasn't the case. But I think I always go back to, it's just like the story of Elisha, right? When Elijah comes down and he touches Elisha, what's Elisha do? He has to burn the plow. And God knew that for this to work for me, I had to burn the plow. There was no way that I was going to be able to make this transition into ministry and stay where I was.
Yeah.
Because the first time it got hard, I would have just gone back to what I knew because it was comfortable. It was easy, right? I would have left, gone back to McDonald's or some type of other corporate position and just done that. But moving me out to Milwaukee required me to burn the plow, right? To make it so I couldn't go back to what I once knew. And I think that was really hard for me because I thought, oh, I'll just step in, everything will be great. I'll talk to people the same way. I'll do things the same way. And no matter how much we think it's the same, ministry and private industry are different. There's expectations about urgency and speed of work. And at first I was like, why is everybody so slow? Like, let's go. And actually caused frustration. Yeah. I think even in terms of the staff, because I wanted to push and push and push because I didn't feel like we were moving fast enough. And at the end of the day, I had to realize like, no, this is kind of the pace that things have to move. We're dealing with people's lives and emotions. And that's different than, just dealing with how much we can put out. And so I think for me, that was the hardest part of that transition is making that adjustment and really growing in my emotional intelligence, because that's really, without a growth in emotional intelligence, I think this never would have worked.
So what would you say, apart from that, are other things that you've noticed that God has done and is teaching you as you've made this transition now that you're 4 years in?
It's not about me. I think people have heard that from me so many times. And it's become kind of my motto. I always hate the word influencer because I think it means more than it actually should. But there's a guy that I follow on social media because I've written to speak, and he's a poet, but I would say it's probably 5 years ago now. He just released this little poem thing online. It's not about me. It's not about me. And it was written over and over and over again. And it hit me really hard because my instinct is to protect myself. My instinct is to take care of myself and my family and to do all that first. And that's not bad, but when that's your instinct over listening to God, it's not good. Because sometimes God's going to call you to a situation in a place where you have to fully surrender and trust that what he's going to do is so much better. And I think that's one of the things that I've had to kind of learn in this process. And by pulling me away from everything and placing me here, he's shown me what he can do. And it's allowed me to do things that maybe I didn't do as well before, which is to lean on other people, to trust that other people can do it instead of just going, hey, watch me. Instead of trusting my own abilities to go, okay, God, who have you placed in my life that can do this? And such a blessing comes from that. When you're able to do that and you're able to see him work and you realize that you don't have to, the weight that gets lifted in that moment.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really good. So as you think about where you are now and you think about kind of like, okay, you've burned the plow, you've moved to Milwaukee, you've got one son who's been launched into life from, Kellen, who when you moved here, he was a freshman.
Yeah.
Right? Was he just finishing his freshman year?
No,
right?
It was the beginning of his freshman year.
Yeah. Talk about a major change for him. Yeah. So just kind of as you forecast into the future, how do you discern, wow, like here's where I am and like what God might have in store for me in terms of like how you're continuing to follow his leading on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, I think it starts with me just being open to God. There's still the piece of me that wants to say no to everything. We've had that conversation. Brian laughs because my first instinct is no.
No.
Can we do this? No.
Yeah.
No. Like it works really good as a parent, right? It doesn't work really good as a parent. But no, I think my instinct is always to say no first. And God is really pushing me to go, okay, how about yes first? And then we'll decide from there.
It's great. I got a whole list of things I'll tell you after this podcast that you can say yes to.
We'll see how I feel at the end of this podcast. But no, it's this idea of like just being open to God. to know that God is consistently and always at work. And what that means, I don't know. And I think I'm becoming more comfortable in that. I don't know, because I know that God will make it work. And part of it is challenging, right? I think for the first 2 years here, I didn't preach at all. Part of that is just there was so much going on, whether it be construction or my doctorate or the ordination process or just me trying to find my footing. But then in the last year, I think like 12 times between here and other places, and just realizing like God has a voice for me there, or rather my voice is for God there. That's probably a better way to word it, than to just stretch myself. I mean, bringing Monty on's been great, playing with social media, trying to do those things that, trying to, like the 16-year-old Kris would have loved.
Are those youth group videos out on YouTube anywhere? Where would if people want to see this side of Kris, where would they go to? The Elevate YouTube page?
Yeah.
We should put a link to that somewhere, because it's like a whole nother side of Kris that people will get a kick out of.
Yeah. And I love that, right? I think there's something about being an executive pastor that, like, you're dealing with operations, you're dealing with money. Like, you have to be focused, right? You have to be direct on things. And so to have that openness to kind of just be playful has been great. And I think to be playful in a way that directs people back to God is even better.
Yeah. I will say that's been one of the things that's been fun about our staff in this season. Like, the playfulness of the staff team has increased. Part of that is you. Part of that is Monty. Part of that is Lindsay too, and just the personalities we have on staff. It's like, it's probably one of the healthier staff teams I've been a part of in this season. And I think it's a large part because people don't take themselves too seriously, which is really, really great. So, yeah. Well, I will say it's been, as I think back to that first email that I got from you, remember sitting in the high school parking lot. I don't remember why I was in the high school parking lot. I might have been picking somebody up from like practice or something, but it just came through. I answered real quick. And then, here we are, what would be almost 4.5 years later. To see the way that God has used you here has been significant. To see the way that you have grown has been really cool to see, and confident that God will continue to use you in significant ways in the years to come is really exciting, because I do think, and we've talked a lot about this, your story is very similar to my dad's story in terms of his move from the corporate world to ministry world. And I feel like people who are making that transition, like, there's something significant about the trust and faith that it takes to make that move, because it's, in some ways, and I don't know from experience because I've only known the ministry world, but it's a very different sort of world. And you just have to like think differently in lots of ways. And I think it takes a certain type of person who's humble and able to trust and able to serve and able to know how to lead in the midst of that makes that transition well, because not everybody can make that transition well, because it's such a strange and unusual transition. So it's been fun to see all of that play out here.
I appreciate that. I think it's funny, like you speak about your dad, and that's that other piece of discernment that came into play. Is the last interview I had
was with my dad.
Interview weekend was with your dad. I remembered. I'm like, well, he's having me sit down with his dad.
Because I think we met for breakfast at North Ave Grill.
Yep.
And I think I got us going. I might have maybe.
No, you didn't even. You just said my dad will be there.
Yeah.
And he's gonna meet with you. And I'm like, okay.
Was I not there?
You were not there yet.
That's right. You guys met.
And we met before you.
Yeah, that was funny.
And you and Becky joined later on. So it was a very interesting. I was like, but I think there was so much comfort in being able to hear your dad's story. And your dad and I have been able to grow over the last 4 years also, which has just been a blessing to me to have somebody like that to be able to mentor me. I think being able to sit down and hear his story and go, oh, I'm not in this alone. Like, because I think you don't hear enough of that story. But the more I've been involved, the more I've started to ask people questions about their story. It's become more and more obvious that God is using people from outside of ministry and bringing them in with their talents and their vision and their abilities. And he's making those things his own. And he's propelling the church because of it. And I think so often we feel like we're on an island. And when we start to see that God's using the people around us, and we can have those conversations with people and be like, oh, it's not just me. Like, Oh my man.
Yeah.
Everything starts to fall into place. You start to go, okay, I have people. I have these people I can relate to and connect to, which is so important.
Yeah. Yeah. Because as you're, we talk about this a lot in terms of discerning Kairos moments, discerning what God is doing. One of the ways you lean into that is in the context of community, whether it's, people in a small group or a neighborhood community, people who are like confirming and affirming things in you, sitting with a possible future boss's dad at a, diner in Milwaukee. Like there's just like, God is going to use other people in your life to confirm and show you the way of what he's doing.
Yeah, I think you just have to be open to that.
Right.
You have to be willing to not just hear the voice in front of you, but to hear the voice that's behind it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think to be open, to be willing, and to say yes. I know we joked about the idea of saying yes to me, but I have in different seasons of ministry, in different places, as I have been growing in this ability to hear from the Lord and respond, people who have taught me about that along the way have said, just be willing to say yes, even if it doesn't make sense, even if it seems scary, and then like watch what God does. It doesn't mean everything's going to be this like slam dunk, but he's going to continue to show you, teach you, refine your character, and you will be able to look back and say like, yes, like that was the right move because I'm walking in step with the Lord. He's confirming it through other people, but I'm also having to exercise a measure of faith and trust along the way.
Yeah, I think what goes with that is being honest with yourself with that question too, and being willing to speak with other people about it. The reason you laugh, right? The reason we joke is because you and I've had that conversation.
Right.
Like it's hard for me sometimes. Like I want to say yes, but all I'm doing is thinking about the negatives. And so there are times when you just challenge me. I'm like, you're saying no. Do you really mean no?
Right.
Or are you just responding no? And Mary Beth has been always that same one to me. I love it and hate it at the same time. She'll do this one. I'll talk to her about something and I'll just be like, but yeah, it doesn't seem right. And she goes, I'm going to pray on that. And I go, right? Because I know what she's saying.
Right.
She's lovingly saying, it feels to me like you're blocking God from doing something. And I'm just going to pray that if that's the case, that he removes the barrier that you put.
I'm going to remember that line. You're going to start to hear me say that. I'm going to pray on that, Kris.
But I think it just, being willing to listen to people, being willing to know that God's going to use them, and understanding the boundaries that we put in place as humans that actually detour some of that. I think it's easier said than done.
Right. Well, we should probably wrap this up and bring this to a close. This has been fun. Good job on making the cut for season 2.
I appreciate it. Hopefully my contract is extended.
Yes, it is. But hey, this has been a fun conversation for me. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it as well. And again, our hope with this season is that the more you engage with us in these conversations, you just have the ability to ask the question, like, what is God doing in my life? We trust that God is present. We trust that he's on the move in your life. The question is, are you aware of that? And are you willing to follow? So we'd love to hear your stories of what you are sensing God is doing in your life. And when you have those, please share them with us and we'll find ways to incorporate them on the podcast along the way. Hey, have a great rest of the week and we'll see you next time.